Sorry, what did you? I had my volume turned down.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Give me 1 second.
Everyone. How are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Oh, thank you. I'm fine too.
That's great. Hi guys, can you hear me? Perfect. I'm so glad to see you guys today. I'm very excited to talk about this article because it's personally touching to Bhumik and I because for the past few years we've been doing some independent research, independent research on curcumin. And so I'm very excited to talk with you guys about it. So let me just share my screen. Are you guys able to see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we need to wait for Divya and then we should be good to go. So just give maybe 1 more minute and then we can get started. Hi, Miss Natarajan, can you hear us?
Yes, Avni, I can hear you. So the thing is, our entire family is sick. So I have joined on behalf of my older one. So I'll just see how it goes, and then probably from next class I'll be more prepared, and then we both can join together.
Sounds good. That sounds
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, so we can get started. Okay, so to start off, we would love to start with some discussion questions. So, can you guys share two things that you learned from the article for now? Maybe we can start with Emma. Would you like to go first? Okay.
Um, well, I knew that from the past that curcumin and turmeric has a lot of benefits, but it was interesting how much it focused on the gastric disorders, and I thought that was interesting. But it at one point in the article, it was talking about how when certain compounds are taken away, then the curcumin doesn't work as well. So it requires other compounds to work, and it also works better with zinc, which I thought was interesting. Um, and it's not water soluble, so they're trying to figure out ways to um, make it more easily soluble in the intestine. Thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, those are amazing points. I know curcumin has a lot of therapeutic potential, but as you said, because it's not water soluble, it has a hard time being bioavailable. And so the intestines can't readily absorb it, which makes it a challenge in research. I know for my research, because it wasn't able to dissolve in water, it became very difficult, especially because our bloodstream is mostly water. And so those were very interesting things you shared. Thank you for sharing. And now, Hadi, do you want to share some things?
Okay, sure. So, first thing which is kind of interesting is just the general idea of, the role of curcumin in being anti-inflammatory and also a potential protectant against carcinogenic cells, I can say, I guess. And the idea of it, being just used as a spice in our daily dishes sometimes, and that is just, not being consumed as let's say like a pharmaceutical product or something that is therapeutic, is kind of really passive. Like it's like a passive benefit. So it's really good to dive into the benefits of curcumin and just turmeric in general, and curcumin in specific being the active ingredient. And second thing is that it's not only anti-inflammatory in regards to the body and the cytokines of the human body. It also worked in when they conducted that in vitro experiment. It also worked against exogenous acids. So I think that was kind of fascinating as well. It doesn't only work with human or let's say endogenous human produced acids, also work with an exogenous acid. So I don't know if I completely understand the context of this, but it just sounds, really effective. So
Yeah, those are also some very good points. I know one of the figures that we will discuss shows that curcumin is very versatile and has a lot of different properties and benefits, as you stated. And so that's very good to note, because I know curcumin is mostly used in Indian spices. And so previously, I thought curcumin just gave the yellow color, but I didn't know that it has so many therapeutic benefits. And so I'm very excited to also go through some of those benefits. And I know Bhumika also has some points and everything. So, yeah.
exactly.
Oh, and Bhumika says in the chat, she found it very interesting how curcumin reduces DNA damage and has protective effects against cancer. Furthermore, it reduces oxidative stress, which in her research last year, she also learned how curcumin is pleiotropic. And so that's very interesting. Also, Bhumika's having technical difficulties right now, which is why she'll probably be using the chat until she can get her internet to fully function. But yeah, do you guys know what oxidative stress is about? Any ideas? Okay, well, you know whenever the body gets stressed, like if you're stressed with homework, for instance, that can cause a lot of issues. Well, similarly, oxidative stress is the property where these reactive molecules, known as free radicals, they become in very high concentrations in the body. And antioxidants are meant to neutralize these free radicals. And by doing so, antioxidants help prevent reactive species from reacting to essential molecules like DNA and protein. And in oxidative stress, the antioxidant systems aren't working to their full efficiency. And so this causes the free radicals to react a lot with these essential molecules, which causes cellular damage, DNA damage, as well as a lot of problems. And it has been implicated in various human diseases. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. And in Bhumika's comment, she also noted pleiotropic, which I believe means that curcumin has a lot of benefits, as Hadi initiated that conversation. And so we'll dive more into that as well. Any questions so far? Okay, perfect. And I personally found it interesting how the article talked about the relationship between the human gut as well as the brain. And so we'll get through that in figure two, I believe. But basically, it's really awesome how the brain is always in charge of all of these organs and how curcumin can actually enhance some of the pathways involved in one's gut, such as the secretion of neurotransmitters, which can change and affect various bodily functions, as well as inflammation pathways, as the article talked about a lot. And so, what did you guys find interesting? And by the way, Bhumika and Miss Natarajan, if you have anything to add, feel free to use the chat or unmute. That would be great. And so, Emma, what did you find interesting?
Well, it's like what you said about the stress. I found it interesting that it helps. It regulates corticosterone secretion and the stress-induced ulcerative action. And I thought that was interesting how it works with all these different parts of the body. Like the gut, it heals the um, lining, but it also helps with the brain. I found that really interesting.
Yes, I definitely agree. It's very interesting how the whole human body is so interconnected. It's often overlooked. Like many people feel like the gut is kind of its own world with the stomach and digest food, but it's so much more complicated and amazing than that. So thank you for sharing again. And Toddy, what did you find interesting?
Okay, well, I guess I would just have to, you know, build more on Emma's idea and just agree with it because, it's exactly the fact that the human body is just so quick and slick at mechanisms that occur, every single moment and how everything is really just, and intraconnected and how it just functions with each other and it malfunctions if another part malfunctions and so on. So, with the idea of free radicals, I guess, and how they relate to tumors happening or the carcinogenic cells, I guess. And like the genes playing a role and the genes and the let's say in regards to curcumin, because it's it can be part of some certain type of dish. So how diet can and genes, while being two completely different things, can influence like a disease that someone might have or a medical condition. So I guess that's just a really pretty generic idea, but I didn't actually dive much into the gist of it because one article can do that much, so I can't really speak and elaborate on the details. So just generally speaking.
That's also a great point to mention. I know many individuals, like scientists, they love to study how diet impacts cancer. And so I believe Bhumika's lab basically did how diet, like the human diet, impacts various genetic factors of cancer. And Bhumika, feel free to comment on this as well. And it's very interesting how diet has so many connections to the human gut as well as various parts of the body. So I thought it was a very interesting point that you brought up and very important to talk about. And Bhumika has a comment. Okay, so she found how curcumin and turmeric is so readily available and can enhance the health of the cellular environment, as well as counteract negative effects imposed by bad dietary habits, like smoking and alcohol consumption. Also, she agrees with you, Hadi, and it was interesting how curcumin can enhance epigenetic modifications. Yes, that's very good to know. And by the way, epigenetics is basically just how genes turn on and off. And so that's very important in the human body.
Well, yeah, and I think it's the fact that we take it for granted, our habits and our diet is just, how it really affects us in a way that we just ignore like too much. And yeah, I guess there needs to be more awareness about this. But, most people just, you know, slip many times and just do the thing that they do or adopt the habit, even if just temporarily, they're generally healthy, but they might slip sometimes and just, do a bad thing. And that can be really consequential.
Yes, I know in the article it mentioned a condition called GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And I really think what you said really resonates with that disease because, especially in the COVID time, when individuals were having sedentary lifestyles and increasing their uptake of junk food and all that jazz with less exercise, it definitely resulted in a lot of gastric disorders and problems such as heartburn and GERD. And I think it's definitely overlooked how important diet and nutrition, as well as physical activity, has on the human body, and it can cause all these problems.
Well, if I may add a point, I
Sure.
think it's also you know, important to not just let's say put the functional aspects on the margin because it's not only objective because the substances, let's say, and the material, the like not the formulas, the compounds, like the idea of the mucus and the epithelial cells. So like let's say they're natural structures and forms, but if the mucosal contact with the epithelial cells, if it got prolonged and happened for like longer time, it does cause the GORD. So you can see that it's just sometimes the time frame and how they correlate. It's not just about the individualized features and um, functions of each of these compounds and forms. So it's just about how they perform together and how they behave. So it's really these interrelations and like I think that studying these relations is even harder than just studying the individual aspects of each of these forms because it leads to unexpected pathways sometimes and how it does really contribute to the overall health of the human body and sometimes just the health of a specific organ or specific potential disease.
That's a great point to bring up as well. Thank you for sharing that as well. And does
And
anyone
thank
else have
you.
anything? Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off, Hadi?
Oh no, I just said thank you. I'm sorry if the mic didn't catch it well.
Oh, of course. And thank you for clarifying that. Does anyone else have anything interesting to add before we move on to any questions?
I couldn't read the entire article because I didn't have enough time to do it. At least
Right.
the one thing is, I actually took Advil because I was not feeling well. After looking at the article, at least the first few pages, I immediately had 1 spoon of turmeric because I
Oh,
read somewhere in the article that it actually negates the effect of NSAID, NSAID drugs. So at least that was a good thing for me.
that is awesome. Yeah, implementing these things into real
Yeah.
life is very good and it's really awesome. I know in Indian cooking, many individuals they put pepper as an active ingredient in order to improve curcumin's efficiency. So
Yeah,
I
I had both of them together.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good thing because I believe pepper can actually increase curcumin's efficiency and potency, and that means it's a really good adjuvant kind of therapy. So that's a great idea as well. Yes, long live Indian cuisine, Hadi. Long live.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so, oh, hold up. Okay, and Bhumika says that she finds it very interesting what Hadi said because it emphasizes the significance of animal models in addition to in vitro models. That's a great thing to mention as well, Bhumika. Let's see. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about the article? Any last comments before we get to analyzing the figures? Okay, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to the figures and start discussing about those. Okay, so here's the first figure. As you can see, it might look like a lot, but we'll try to help you break it down and understand the big parts about this figure. So I can give you about 1 minute to maybe look at your notes and try to figure out what's going on in this figure. And then Emma, I would love it if you could start the discussion on the figure. That would be great. Perfect. Okay, so I'll give about 1 minute. Okay, so it's been about 1 minute. Are you guys ready to start discussing?
I have to drop off at 10:30. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you for joining, and we really hope you join us for the next session and
I
everything.
intend to.
Perfect. Well, let's see. Oh, it's 10:30 in like about 5 minutes, so feel free to drop off when you need to. It was a pleasure meeting you as well. Okay,
Thank
so
you,
of
Ramani. Thank you.
course. Emma, would you like to start us off?
Okay. I like this figure because I feel like it does a good job showing the what curcumin does, what it causes to happen, what it stimulates, and what it stops from happening, what it inhibits. So it I don't know what all of the each of the things stand for, but I think it's interesting how it inhibits cancer growth, and I think Bhumika was talking about that. Um, I yeah, I'm not entirely sure each like COX2 expression, but I like how it shows what else that causes, like with it reduces inflammation and apoptosis and tissue injury. So I think it's interesting how it shows all about curcumin that way.
I agree. That's also a very good thing to bring up. I also didn't really know what a lot of these words meant, so I kind of searched it up a teeny bit to understand the general gist. From my understanding, the NFKB pathway is involved in inflammation, inflammatory pathways. The COX-2 expression activity, I believe, yeah, that's also involved in inflammation. So, in general, I think these types of molecules and responses, they're all involved in the oxidative stress pathway that I was describing earlier. That's my understanding, and Bhumika, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong at any point. And I also liked how you said that curcumin inhibits certain pathways and molecules while it also initiates certain pathways and molecules. Yeah, and diagrams diagrams showcase this by using this type of line whenever it's inhibiting, and then the arrow means that it's improving the expression. And so, as you can see from the antioxidant enzymes such as SOD, which is superoxide dismutase, which is one of our human enzyme antioxidants. So, it's really good that this diagram showcases how it promotes these promotes the efficiency of these enzymes. And Hadi, do you have anything to incorporate as well?
Well, not much, to be honest. I'm still kind of figuring out the correlation between what's in the diagram and just connect these points together if I'm not wrong. So I'm sorry for this.
No, no, no worries. Um, oh, I see Bhumika has a comment. She said the nuclear factor kappa B pathway is involved in the transcription of pro-inflammatory genes, thus contributing to inflammation. That is very interesting. Okay, so transcription, by the way, that's the copying of DNA into RNA molecules. And yeah, okay, that sounds all good. And so basically, what I think this figure is basically saying is curcumin is a pleiotropic molecule, which means it has a lot of benefits. And so it reduces oxidative stress, reduces inflammation, as well as increases the activity of antioxidants, such as these enzymes here. And this results in better and more efficient human body functions, brain functions, and it reduces apoptosis, which is cellular death, as well as tissue injury. And so that all looks good. Let me just make sure we covered everything. Oh, yeah. And another important point is that curcumin has been showed by numerous studies to inhibit cancer growth and cancer metastasis, which also makes it a very good candidate to research cancer therapies. Anything to add, Bhumika? Feel free to use the chat. Okay, so Bhumika's wondering if reducing apoptosis has negative effects by reducing healthy cells in the body. That is a very interesting question. What do you guys think?
I was wondering something sort of along that lines too, because it says it's talking about the on page 4, curcumin supporting the apoptosis of cancer cells. And then it says, however, this treatment resulted in an almost doubled apoptotic frequency compared to the non-supplemented control patients. So it didn't really say whether that part was the healthy cells or the cancer cells. So I wasn't sure if, sort of like what Mika said, if it um, harmed the healthy cells. Well, that doesn't really seem like it would make sense, but I wasn't entirely sure about that.
That's a very good point. I didn't consider the impact of reducing apoptosis and what effect that could have on healthy cells. But I think Emma, you're on the right track that it might have something to do with just apoptosis in cancer cells, because that way it might actually be effective. Because I feel like healthy cells, they have their own, mitotic and interface checkpoints like G1 and G2 and everything. And so they can regulate apoptosis by themselves. But cancer cells, they aren't really able to control their apoptosis because they keep dividing and keep spreading. And so I'm gonna have to do more research on that, but I will send an email with a more definitive answer. Great question, Bhumika. And Tati says maybe targeted apoptosis somehow. That is also a very good point. I really hope curcumin has targeted apoptosis ability because that would mean that it would hopefully be more efficient. And Bhumika says that because curcumin reduces DNA damage and apoptosis occurs in cells due to DNA damage, then maybe that reduces apoptosis. So that's also a very interesting point and good to mention. And so, yes, I'm gonna have to get back to you guys with some research, but very, very good question. And so I think that's a general idea of figure one. And we have about 5 minutes left for discussion. So how about we move to figure two? Okay, so here's figure two. As you can see, this was what I was talking about the gut-brain barrier and everything. Oh, and Hadi has a comment. Do you think we've reached this point of targeted apoptosis? I really hope so, Hadi. I mean, with all the research going on, I really hope so. So we need to research a bit and feel free to research on your own side as well. Maybe you come up with differing perspectives. So this will be very interesting to comment about. Okay, so Emma, did you have any thoughts about what figure two is talking about? I can give you a few seconds if you need it.
Well, I did notice it had this stimulation and inhibition again, and this it seemed to talk about the Helobacter pylori activity that they called it a pathogen. Um, and I thought that was interesting. I hadn't heard of that pathogen before, so that was interesting. And it also mentions Barrett's esophagus, which I looked up and saw that's when the esophagus becomes red and inflamed from, I believe it was prolonged acid reflux. So, um, I guess I don't really understand the rest of it. Um, I do see it has the NO, which I'm assuming is something with nitrogen and oxygen, and it had said that that was necessary for um, the curcumin to work. Um, but maybe you have other things to add.
That's a really good start to this discussion. I like how you notice the lines again, inhibition and heightened efficiency. Hadi, do you have anything to add to this discussion on figure two?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I've been looking up some info on targeted apoptosis, but okay, let me look. I think I'm supposed to come up with something. So okay, this figure is already packed with a lot. So let me just try to narrow down some ideas. Okay, Barrett's esophagus, reflux esophagitis. That's how it's pronounced, and curcumin. So I can see that it indicates that curcumin eventually leads to gastric protection, and it can reduce ulcer size or ulcer size. I'm not sure how this is pronounced. And it also has an anti-Helicobacter pylori activity and capsaicin, I think. It inhibits vagal afferents, and this is a signal, a neurosignal that comes out of the stomach right to the brain. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm mixing it up, but
No, you're good. You're saying it perfectly.
okay, and it also inhibits you know, um, inhibits the hydrochloric acid if it's on the verge of increasing. And yeah, I think that's what I can mainly deduce like right now. But yeah.
Yeah, those are good observations. As Hadi and Emma, you both were saying, curcumin, it basically functions in lowering the amount of HCl. HCl is our primary gastric acid, and as you can see, it inhibits the increase of HCl. And that's really good because, as Emma, you were describing Barrett's esophagus. Basically, with GERD and all of these various conditions, the esophagus basically becomes the sphincter becomes less effective, and so HCl and those gastric juices basically start coming up, and that causes heartburn. And so curcumin works by inhibiting like HCl production. I believe Helicobacter pylori activity, that's the main enzyme that secretes HCl. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. And therefore, by suppressing that activity for that enzyme a little bit, that results in less HCl concentration and therefore less ulceration, therefore basically protecting the the gastric walls and everything. And also, this also shows how the brain has a lot of impacts in communication with the gut, which is through the vagal afferents and vagal efferents. And so that's all about the gut brain interactions and everything. And Bhumika has a question, what are ulcers? It says that curcumin reduces ulcer size, so I assume ulcers are negative. Yes, and Emma says that it might be a tear in the stomach lining caused by stomach acid. I think you're definitely right, Emma. Ulcers are definitely a negative thing that many individuals, especially the elderly, struggle with. And Bhumika's other question is, curcumin stimulates gastric vasodilation. Does this increase blood flow, thereby oxygenating tissues and enhancing gastroprotection? I believe because vasodilation, that increases the blood vessel size, and ideally that should, as you said, mean that there's increased blood flow to the regions, oxygenating tissues and enhancing gastroprotection. I think that's a really good flow chart. I'm also going to have to research that and get back to you with a more definitive answer, but that would make sense based on the logic and previous biology concepts that I know.